We will introduce the commissioners beginning to my right.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Pluckon.
Vivian Salaga, Historic Preservationist.
Patricia Ortiz, AICP.
Missy Schufrat, designer.
And we will do the swearing in, please. So everyone wishing to speak today, please rise.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
The next item on our agenda are announcements by Dennis Fernandez, the HPC Administrator.
Good morning, Commissioners. Welcome to today's hearing. I have no announcements except to welcome you to the new year. We have the calendar for the 2019 meeting cycle in your packets. Feel free to reference that if you know of any dates that perhaps you are going to be conflicted out. It would be helpful for the staff to know those ahead of time. Once you conclude the review of the minutes, before we enter into our item number 6, I've asked the legal department just to give you some background on the process and where we've been at and where we're going to with the subject of today's meeting. Thank you.
Have the commissioners had an opportunity to review the minutes from the December meeting?
Yes.
Or November, actually.
Yes.
All those in favor of adopting the minutes as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are adopted. At this point in time, we would like to ask the legal counsel to give us a review of the circumstances surrounding the subject of today's hearing and the history of where it began, where it has continued, and where we are today, and what our expectation is for the conclusion of this meeting.
Thank you. To bring everyone a bit of background, initially this body addressed the issue of fencing as it's currently set forth in the Tampa Heights Historic District design standards by an informal process. When staff presented to the City Council expressed a desire to have the process be more formally addressed, specifically being deleting a sentence from the Tampa Heights Historic District design standards, which treats fence height differently within the district than that within the city code, so that it will in essence be treated to simply conform to city code. By ordinance, the formal process that we were to undertake has 2 basic steps. The first one is receipt by this body of comments from the public and the applicable regulatory commission, which is the Architectural Review Commission. So to that end, this public hearing was set with notice given to property owners within the district. And then staff will go ahead and solicit some comments from the Architectural Review Committee at one of their meetings. I understand the next one is February 4th. Oh, I'm sorry. So then you will have your next meeting, and you will go ahead and make a recommendation to City Council after receiving those comments here today again and from the ARC.
That's okay.
So-
Now, Elaine, if you could, please, or Dennis, will you be making remarks?
Just to outline the process a little bit as we move through today's meeting, I've asked Elaine to go ahead and provide a similar PowerPoint to what we've looked at in the past, but for the record and for those that may not have attended the meeting or seen it on television, brings them up to speed. We'll be taking public comment. Individuals in the public are allowed 3 minutes for each individual. If they have an individual that wants to donate their time, there's a form that can be filled out. That individual does need to be, that donates their time, needs to be present and needs to acknowledge that they donated their time prior to doing that. Once we take in the public comment, If there's any questions that the board has or discussion, then that would be the appropriate time for that to occur. And with that, Elaine will come up with the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, the Historic Preservation staff. We have a presentation for you this morning that will just cover, as Dennis said, talking about the current design guidelines of the district, some applicable other regulations like that come from the City Code of Ordinances, and a brief comparison of how things are currently different under the Tampa Heights design guidelines than they are under the Basic Code of Ordinances, and show you the this change that has been discussed by City Council, and then lead into the public comment portion. So the Tampa Heights design guidelines, and there's a copy in your packet, I believe, of the section on fences and walls, state that fences in the historic district vary from one architectural style to another, and that the fence materials that were installed during the Tampa Heights period of historic significance include various wood designs, brick, and wrought iron. You can see in the picture there, there's a current picture at the top showing one of the unique walls around a property in Tampa Heights, and then the lower picture showing one of the, from the historic period, showing one of the iron fences that was common at that time. When brick or stone was used on the building, brick or stone walls were commonly used. There are also some examples of original wrought iron fences. These photos, one is from about 1900. It's showing one of the residences in Tampa Heights, and then there's a little blurb from the newspaper at that time talking about the attractive iron picket fence that he was putting up around his house. It's a little difficult to make out in that photo, but it is shown. And then the other photo shows an example of a low brick wall. Older buildings whose ground levels were constructed of rusticated masonry, cast concrete imitating stonework, were also common within the district, and this same rusticated masonry was repeated in pillars and portions of fences and retaining walls. I have a photo here of a masonry retaining wall shown on Oak Avenue from the period of historic significance around 1919, and then one that's existing today on Palm Avenue. The design guidelines state that it is important to maintain the original historic fences and walls in Tampa Heights. When a fence or wall remains from Tampa Heights period of historic significance, the fence or wall shall be restored using original materials and original construction techniques. Here, this is showing one of the original iron fences that remains in Tampa Heights on 7th Avenue. And you can see in a photo from about 1925 on the bottom there that it was there at that time. When new fences are introduced, materials that are compatible with the style, texture, or exterior materials of the primary building on the site should be used. And we have two examples here of the low picket fences that go with some of the simple wood frame houses in the district. The one on the top right there is a historic structure, and then the one on the bottom is new construction. The design guidelines are specific about the materials that are permitted in the district. They state that elevations that front a street, either a front or side yard, shall be constructed of a material such as wood, masonry, vinyl, or wrought iron. And then this is an example of a wood picket fence with brick pillars that's on the corner. Rear yards may employ vinyl-clad chain link. The vinyl-clad chain link shall not be permitted on that portion of a corner lot that faces a public street that is paved and in use. Vinyl-clad chain link fences may be used in the rear yard and shall not be installed beyond the rear building facade. The design guidelines are also specific to the height of fences allowed in the district. Fence height should conform to City of Tampa codes. Fences or walls along the front yard and along a corner yard along the building facing a street shall be no higher than 4 feet. Beyond the rear of the building, the fence height may increase to the maximum height allowed in the Tampa zoning code. And the design guidelines are explicit in that it is permissible to maintain existing original fences and walls, and to design new fences and walls which will be compatible with historic fences and walls in the Tampa Heights Historic District in scale, height, material, color, and texture. They also state that it is permissible to design new fences and walls which will be compatible with the style or period of building to which they are being added. To cover vinyl clad chain link fences with landscaping, and to leave wood fences unpainted. The guidelines go on to state that it is not permissible to remove existing original fences or walls that are in good condition, or to design new fences or walls which are incompatible with the scale and height of other fences and walls in the historic district. So when we compare this to what's permitted by the City Code of Ordinances, it's in section 27290.1 of the City Code. The code is specific to what's permitted in front yards as far as height. And it says that for residential uses, fences and walls may be located within required front yards provided that the height does not exceed 3 feet for fences or walls built of opaque materials, or 4 feet for fences built of transparent materials that do not obstruct light, visibility, or air. So that would be something like a 4-foot high picket fence. And then the code goes on to state that the maximum height for fences and walls for single and multiple family districts is 6 feet. And decorative architectural features on fences and walls shall not extend more than 1 foot above the maximum height and shall have a minimum of 8-foot spacing between them. The code also provides for us definitions of what the yards are under section 27161. It notes that the front yard is the space between the side lot lines across the portion of the lot adjacent to the street on the front side of the building there. And porches are allowed to project into a front yard in some conditions under some zoning categories. So the front yard then goes all the way across the front of the yard. The side yard is the area between the front yard and the rear lot line. So it goes from where the front yard exists all the way back to the very back of the lot. And the rear yard is the side in between the lot lines at the opposite end of the lot from the front yard. So you can see in these examples that the rear yard is, by city code definitions, is a smaller area, smaller width than the front yard. And corner yards are the yard that is adjacent to the street that is not the front yard. So on corner lots, the shorter side of the lot is the front. So this diagram shows you the basic difference between what's permitted in the Tampa Heights Historic District and what's permitted outside of the Tampa Heights Historic District. If you're outside of the Tampa Heights Historic District, and that's the diagram on the left, then you can have a 6-foot high fence that goes along both your side yards all the way up to the front yard. If you are in the Tampa Heights Historic District, currently you can have a 6-foot high fence around your interior side yard, your rear yard, up to the and your corner yard up to the point where the building line is. And for the front yard, you can have your 3 or 4 foot high fence, and then the corner side yard has to have a 3 or 4 foot high fence that extends all the way back to the rear of the building. So on September 20th, I believe has been touched on, City Council made a motion for the HBC to consider modifying the fence setback guidelines to remove the fence height language for corner yards. So at this time, if it's your pleasure, you can open the floor for public comment. And I'm available if you have any questions as well after the comment.
At this point in time, we will open the public hearing to comment. Please be reminded that each of you who wishes to speak has a 3-minute time limit. And if you are taking time from others, we would need the speaker's waiver form, and that person, however, must be present in the room in order to allow someone to take their minutes. So, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. My name's Rick Fernandez, 2906 North Elmore, Tampa 33602. That's in the National and Local Historic District. I'm president of the Tampa Heights Civic Association, which is the only reason I'm speaking first. These folks have been kind enough to give me that courtesy. First of all, thank you all for your service. What you do here is very important, but I'll admit, first time I've been before you, so I'm glad to have had this opportunity. I'm not sure why we're here, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I'm thinking it must have been a slow day at City Council that day, that this became an issue, and we're here doing this. I looked back over my document trove, and the first letter I have regarding this issue is dated June 26th of 2018. And this was a letter to Dennis Fernandez from me, outlining the position of the Tampa Heights Civic Association and our Historic Preservation Committee to the effect that we stand behind and support the historic preservation guidelines, these guys. Now, this book was handed to me, I think back in 2011 or 2012 by Mr. Fernandez's office before I ever bought my house on Elmore. And I just figured if I want to buy a house and live in Tampa Heights, I'm going to support these because the historic guidelines are important and I'm buying a little piece of history. And if I don't want to be controlled, if you will, by these guidelines, then I ought to live somewhere else. So I bought it, and I bought it all. And I hope to leave the house and the district better than I found it. The bottom line is Tampa Heights right now is the wild, wild west. Those of you that are around and in the community frequently know what I'm talking about. Infill is going crazy. We have issues about the CRA and whether we want to extend or create a new one. We're talking about form-based code with the city. Opportunity zones are an issue now, though most of us don't understand them, but they're there. How is that going to affect us? The North Franklin Street businesses are forming up their own little union and trying to figure out how they want to develop. When you put it all together, it's pretty confusing. Whereas Tampa Heights, one of the oldest neighborhoods, if not arguably the oldest in the city of Tampa, where are we going to wind up at the other end of all this development? And right now, the only guiding star we have is this. And for some reason, somebody wants to mess with it. And I don't know why. So it seems like much to do about nothing, quite honestly. We hope you will support the guidelines as they exist. I think that tells me I have another 30 seconds. Support the guidelines as they exist. I have several members of the Civic Association board here. I think most, if not all of them, intend to comment. And we also have members here of the Historic Preservation Committee who have great passion around this issue. Both the board and the HPC have taken action on this. The HPC voted to support, the board voted to support, and I have the letter from the board to Mr. Fernandez here that I'll leave with council and can be distributed. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
As a matter of protocol, should we hold our questions to the end of the public hearing?
I think that Dennis suggested that you could do that together at the end, but
Okay.
if you have ones that you want to ask right now, it would be within your authority to do so.
All right, thank you.
Are you done with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm not going anywhere. All right.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Good to see you. Thanks again for your services, as Mr. Fernandez said. And I think it's good to be back here again. It's good to be back in front of you, but not for the same issue. I am only here as the liaison for the board and with the Historic Preservation Committee of our neighborhood. And I will repeat, won't be long, I'll repeat the same thing that I've said the last 2 times that we were here on this issue, is reflecting what our president just said and reflecting what the position of our Historic Preservation Committee is, that we want to maintain our guidelines as they are. There are so many other issues going on, and to interrupt that and open what could be become a can of worms in so many areas when it is a solid guideline that we are able to follow right now. I think one of the questions when I was here the last time was asking how much of the community gets involved with the process of the implementing the guidelines, if you remember. And having done what you've done, sent communication to every member, every household within the guidelines, having signs placed throughout the neighborhood, following up with discussions at our civic association meeting, at our at our civic association board meeting, and with the committee. I think what you will see here is that we generally do represent what all of the neighbors and the ones who care to respond are in line with what we said before. So thank you again. Bye-bye.
Just as a matter of housekeeping, at the opening of the meeting, I neglected to indicate that if you would please put all your cell phones on silence during the course of this meeting. Thank you.
Good morning. Justin Rickey. I'm a Tampa Heights resident. My address is 103 East 26th Avenue, Tampa, Florida. I am the vice president of the Tampa Heights Civic Association. I don't have the luxury of living within the historic overlay. I can tell you that I wish I had the same protections that people that do live in that area have. It is a benefit to the fabric and all the beautiful things that make Tampa Heights a unique place to live within Tampa. I moved here from the city of Chicago 10 years ago. One of the reasons I chose Tampa Heights as a neighborhood for me to live was because of that unique character and fabric. Now, we have these guidelines in place to maintain the character and fabric of the neighborhood that is a draw. Chipping away at these guidelines opens doors that I don't think you'll be able to close. It starts with a fence, and then it goes to other exterior siding. It's a slippery slope, right? It can start with something as small as a fence, but you give a developer an inch, and I can guarantee you they will take a football field, all right? I think we can all say that's probably what will happen. And we see it happening now in our southwest quadrant, as Mr. Fernandez alluded to. You see it every day. We see monstrous stucco buildings being built that don't fit in our neighborhood. They're abhorrent. The architectural quality of new construction that is being built where we don't have the protections of the historic overlay it's mind-blowing. How people think that it's okay to build structures like that in a neighborhood that we live in. So I'm pleading with you, please, maintain the guidelines, represent the community, do what you can to help us preserve our neighborhood. Because, like I said, if I could extend those protections to where I lived, I would gladly do it. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Hey there, my name is Shane, 507 East Nebraska Avenue. I do live within the historic bounds of Tampa Heights. I also am the Northeast Quadrant representative for the Civic Association. I stand before you to ask you to uphold the guidelines. 2 years ago, when my husband and I were buying our home, we were actually looking in historic districts just for the reason that was just spoken about, is they are a protection from the development that's being seen in neighborhoods like Tampa Heights, Ybor, the Hampton Terrace area. And those are areas that do need protection. You know, there's a lot of empty lots, there's a lot of homes that are going to be getting turned over in the next couple of years as those areas become more and more desirable. Excuse me. One of the things you'll note too with these corner lots is a lot of them are falling on very narrow historic roads. You place 6-foot privacy fences on these narrow roads, they now become alleyways. So it's important from an integrity standpoint to ensure that these roads are being upheld with visible sight lines that make sense for the district. We don't have the luxury of large setbacks like they do in some of the newer neighborhoods, and that's the reason why we came there. It's because we like to be a little bit closer to one another. We like to have close yards, and we like to be neighbors with one another. One of the other things I want to call out is that this is an agreed upon term that I made when I purchased my home, that the neighborhood made when they purchased their home, that we would all be neighbors and agree to the guidelines that were presented. And with that, we want to make sure that these are being upheld, and I hope that you pass along that. That's our standing. Thank you.
Is there, yeah, well, here we go.
Good morning. John Foster, 308 East Addis Street, and I am a member of the Historic Preservation Committee. And I think we've got some basic problems here that hopefully I can rectify. Is this thing working? Yes. Oh, okay, thank you. I've never done this before, Elaine, so. Put that on there. I'll switch it over here in a second. Okay. I thought we should all see exactly what what we're here about and where this all started. This is the Chapman residence, and the Chapmans are right over there. As you can see right here, this is the fence in question. By guidelines, it should come to the back of the house. It goes to the front of the house. So that began the whole shebang here. Where it continued, and this is a transcript from the September 20th, 2018 City Council meeting. Can you all see that? And this is Mr. Fernandez over here speaking. He said they were discussing about the relevant committees and who was going to get input from the Civic Association, the Historic Preservation Commission, et cetera. Mr. Fernandez said on June 26th, the letter that the other Mr. Fernandez says, I know you need a scorecard here. From Tampa Heights, the Civic Association essentially illustrating their support for the existing guidelines and requesting to engage in the process of guidelines are modified. Well, that's not exactly true. As Mr. Fernandez commented, both committees, assigned the two committees, Historic Preservation, which I'm on it, and Land Use, both committees have offered the same recommendation: support the existing guidelines. There was no and, there was no or, it was an or, and or. We don't support changing it. So Mr. Fernandez misspoke on that. Mr. Fernandez. The reason we're here, one of the reasons the city council meeting, is Miss Capine, is that how you pronounce her name? Yvonne Capine? Okay. Okay, we need to get back to, this was after the presentation and the recommendations. We need to go back to the drawing board. We think we need to definitely participate. I would move that we modifying the fence setbacks. That's a motion that should be looked at. I know you studied all that's happened, what's recommended. That's not what's happening there. And therefore, one person was brought up for their fence when discovered across the street, next door, their fence is exactly like that. Well, that's not exactly true either. Again, this is Mr. Chapman's house here. This is the house directly across the street that Ms. Capine was referring to. The Bedores, the fence, when this house was built, it's brand new, it's about a year old. The fence was originally extended to the front. When it was brought to their attention that the fence was in violation, they moved it to the back, as you can see it right here. And I guess I'm out of time. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
and I'm going to leave you copies of the documents I just gave.
All documents that are being submitted as evidentiary in this hearing will be moved and accepted into the record at the conclusion of the hearing.
Thank you.
My name is Scott Palmer, and I live at 2824 North Central Avenue between Florabraska and Columbus. Been in the neighborhood for 25 years, and I, like some of the others, moved into the neighborhood because of the historical guidelines. And I think it's important to maintain the guidelines as they were written, and it protects homeowners from unscrupulous, but possibly the wrong word, but work that's being done by contractors and homeowners that don't fit the architectural guidelines of the neighborhood. So I'm here to support not changing the guidelines. I think that the fence ordinance should stay exactly like it is in Tampa Heights. Thank you.
Okay. It's here. Now we have to go down here. Oh, where's the mouse? Got it? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Elaine, how do I use it with these keys? Just hit that. Okay. Good morning. My name is Mary McCann. I live at 2812 North Central Avenue in the Historic District. I know we talked about integrity last time I presented, but I would like to refresh because it's important. Integrity is defined in the National Register Bulletin 15, which is the guidance used for determining historical and maintaining historical significance. It's also the document that City Code is your code for reviewing and determining significance. The integrity is the ability of a property to convey its significance, and it must be present. It isn't one or the other. It is the equal partner. Assessing the aspects of integrity to convey his significance must be grounded in understanding of the property's physical features and how they relate to that significance. You can be old and standing, but if you don't have the aspects of integrity, location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, and feeling and association, then you do not meet the National Register criteria for evaluation. When they are gone, they are in fact gone. The ones in red are what are most important here in this district to maintaining its integrity. Design is the combination of elements that to create the form, plan, and space. Tampa Heights was nominated for its importance pre-1946 community planning to development. That makes the spatial relationships between and among the buildings particularly important to conveying our importance. Setting is the physical environment of a historic property. It is the character of place, and it needs to be maintained. Feeling, one I don't usually use but is very important here, is a property's expression as the aesthetic or historic sense of a particular time. We need to have these features to maintain our significance, and the high fences of modern intrusion of late are particularly disruptive because they alter the streetscape and the relationship between the buildings. We were significant in a period before air conditioning, windows open, air circulation, light, very important to us. What we have here is not an issue of integrity, or that the guidelines are bad. It is that we have a lack of enforcement of violations and misrepresentations of what the feelings of the district are. We're getting more and more of the fences because they're not brought into conformance. And as we know, once the snowball starts and there's precedent, that there are going to be many, many more coming, and that's exactly what's happened. The other issue that we have is that the staff itself is approving them. This is a 2018 where you can see on North Central Avenue, staff is granting permission because the 6-foot fence can start at the house, when in fact on a corner lot it needs to start at the back of the house. This pushes us in reverse. What we need from you is an unequivocal message to the executive and legislative branches to maintain the guidelines. Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak on this matter?
Good morning. My name is Chapman. I live at 2723 North Morgan Street, Tampa, Florida, 33602. And I believe all of this started because of a fence that I put up. And after I put that fence up, I received a letter saying that I was in violation of the law. And I think that each and every one of you in here, that we all want to heed to the law, you know, to the order of law. In the law, at that time, I believe the young lady opened up, she went back as far as history of saying that, she went back as far as 1919, under the umbrella of history. History dictates history. You got wrought iron, you got stone, you got chain link, you got wood. Then included under that umbrella of history, one man might want this part of history, another man might want that part of history. And in that process, these fences where I have my fence erected at, that history dictated it throughout that whole neighborhood. All right, for a long period of time. The good Lord allowed me to build that house there in 1999. So I've been there about 19 years. All right, now in that period of time, it wasn't a gingerbread neighborhood then, and it's not a gingerbread neighborhood now. I have been broken into about 3 times, stuff stolen out of the yard. I have an alarm system in place, but yet and still I was broken in, but burglarized, stuff got taken, Tampa police retrieved it for me, we got it back. All right, the minute I erected the fence, all the burglaries stopped. All the burglaries stopped. Now, I'm not in violation of the law, but I was labeled in violation as a criminal. All right, now what I didn't do was heed to some guidelines that don't fit. It's not one size fit all. My wife and I took our time and went down to the law library and looked up every one of these words that's in the guidelines. And none, even though they was beautifully presented, none of those words said that I broke the law, but I was labeled as breaking the law. Well, I stand before this board to ask you to heed by the law. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Becky Clark. I'm with Tampa Preservation Incorporated, and probably more than most people in this room, I was very familiar with Tampa Heights before it was a historic district. Tampa Preservation worked and did a lot of rehabilitation and new construction in Tampa Heights before the district was put in place. It's come a long way. The guidelines are very necessary as a point of discussion and enforcement, and a starting point for consistency throughout the district. I would really urge you to uphold them.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter?
Yes, good morning. My name is Judy Gillette. I live at 502 East Sparkman. I didn't understand what she had said about chain fences. And if she would like to come and repeat that, I didn't understand what she had said. That's all I needed about the chain fence.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Then, seeing none, we will close the public hearing and open questions and comments and discussions by the commissioners. And I'll start anywhere. How about you, Missy?
I just have a few questions, mainly of the staff. Just please remind me, and I'm sorry I don't know this off the top of my head, what year was the district established, the local historic district?
The local historic district was established in 2000, and the design guidelines were adopted in the same year.
2000. Also in 2000?
Yes.
And with regard to Mr. Chapman's fence, was that a staff approval?
Mr. Chapman's fence, the application that he brought forward to have the fence at the height that the 6-foot high height on the corner side yard of his property was brought to the ARC at a public hearing, and it was denied there.
It was denied?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
For the record, Patricia Ortiz. Elaine, could you just clarify something for me? My thought is that Mr. Chapman's fence was built without permit or prior approval. Is that correct?
Correct. Permits are not required. Building permits are not required for fences. There was not a certificate of appropriateness issued by the Architectural Review Commission by either the board or staff.
So in summary, the fence was constructed without approval?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But you had, Elaine, mentioned that Mr. Chapman did appear before ARC, so that was subsequent to the notification that he indicated he had received?
He appeared before let me grab my material here. The code violation was issued prior to him appearing before the ARC. So that was, when the violations are issued, the affected party has the opportunity to correct the situation. One of the avenues through that can be through an approval by the ARC. However, the ARC did not see fit to approve that particular application.
One more question, and the ARC process, is that a hardship-based process where one would have the opportunity to express the need for a fence and associated hardships that would back that up?
It's not like requesting a variance. Mm-hmm. Since it's only an item that is addressed within this particular provision is just addressed within the design guidelines for Tampa Heights. You can present the information that you feel is necessary to the board.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
So Mr. Chapman stated that his home was built in 1999, which was prior to the adoption of the guidelines. Was the fence in question appears to not have been built at the time that the home was built. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, this fence was built in 2017.
Okay. And when the guidelines were adopted, the language with respect to the fencing requirements was as it appears today, or has it been changed over time?
I believe that it was as, the current language is what was adopted in 2000. I'm not
And
aware of
the
any changes to the design guidelines.
Process to have adopted those guidelines included various and numerous public hearings.
Yes. There were. Yes.
And notifications to the residents of the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't really have any questions. It's heartening to see so many people from the community come out for this meeting and speak, and mostly in favor of the existing guidelines. So, having more questions to ask.
Okay. So it is my understanding now that as this process moves forward, we have received this information and the input from the neighborhood and the property owner of the property in question. This information is taken in, and now there will be a required presentation before the ARC, which is tentatively scheduled for their March meeting. The ARC will then present their findings to this commission, and at that point in time, given the neighborhood input at this meeting and the input from the ARC at the meeting, presumably the meeting in March that is scheduled, we will then be called upon to make a renewed recommendation to City Council for their consideration.
Good morning, Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Just a little bit on the timing. I will definitely coordinate next steps with the neighborhood association so that they can, if they choose to attend the subsequent meeting with the Architecture Review Commission, which I'm planning as of today to be in March, which would be in advance of your March 12th public hearing. So should give us enough time for you to get whatever type of guidance that they give and then formulate a formal recommendation to City Council, which then staff will take back to them at the appropriate time. The issue, just to clarify, the salient issue that has been talked about a number of times that we'll be taking back to the Architecture Review Commission is the discussion that occurred at City Council both in September and November about eliminating the corner element, decrease in height and rear yard placement that Elaine went through on the PowerPoint. So that's where staff is focusing right now. We're not presenting any other alternatives or modifications other than that particular issue that's been discussed over and over again.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Dennis, the last time we were here, I made mention if it was possible to get any kind of report in terms of code violations within the historic district. And there was a document that was presented to us. I'm not sure if that came from city or if that was an outside source. Has there been any movement on that, any information?
We've looked at the document. We've been able to, the document that was provided to us, we essentially analyzed. We did note that there were a couple of violations within that document. One of them actually was corrected since we last met. There's a couple others that we're coordinating with code enforcement on. Some of these violations deal not only specifically with design standards, but also with zoning requirements. So it's usually a collaborative effort. There were two, I believe one of which was notated on the report that was provided to you by a member of the association that were approved by staff. One of those approved was my decision to approve based on handicap need. The second one was essentially an error that was done by the staff. We are educating ourselves, I think, better on this subject within the district and trying to coordinate our efforts internally to ensure that, you know, when we're reviewing something, we're taking in the entire site and not just portions of the site. Sometimes you kind of focus in on what the issue is and, you know, at the expense of something else that might be within a plan. We are requiring any sort of site modification within the office that it comes in, particularly dealing with these fence issues, to be, you know, carefully considered by one of the planners, not another member of the staff, but one of the planners that are assigned to reviewing presented documents.
Thank you. And this may be a question for the city attorney. So the cases that are currently in violation, are these active cases? Is the city working on them actively? Letters have been sent out, owners have been told they need to come into compliance, et cetera?
There are active violations that are in play. Mr. Chapman's was an active violation as well. So those are continuing through the code enforcement process. We'll continue to, if there's something that's done in the meantime, we'll continue to pursue those within the capabilities of our resources when we know about them in a timely fashion. I think there are some of the reports that have been given to us that are extremely difficult to substantiate, to be able to really go through the code enforcement process and say when the violation occurred. I mean, the city has a burden to be able to demonstrate when a property is in violation. So those will be an administrative decision if we pursue those through the code enforcement process or not.
Okay, thank you.
In our packets, there was an extraordinarily thorough report that I am assuming came from the neighborhood association, and I just would like to commend them on the accuracy and the thoroughness and the information that that report provides. It's a wonderful point of, it's a starting in looking at all of the conditions within the neighborhood that would fall under the consideration of the issue open today. So
I just wanted to comment that is, you know, it's you know, very encouraging to have the neighborhood support behind these issues. It's not often the case. So it's you know, I think if anything, this process, you know, one of the byproducts of this process has been that the staff has been able to really kind of forge, I think, a stronger relationship with the association and understand their perspectives. Sometimes there's this sort of silent, you know, element when we're dealing with these things that, you know, we're applying the written letter, but it's very valuable to hear, you know, how the residents of the area, you know, perceive the guidelines and how they perceive them affecting their quality of life within the district. The report that Commissioner Salaga was referring to is the one that we were discussing with Ms. Shoecraft. And I think, you know, moving forward, that type of acknowledgement and engagement by the neighborhood is going to make our implementation and enforcement process much more successful.
I'm sorry, Dennis, I do have one more question, if that's okay. So I've lived in many historic districts over time, and I know that these code enforcement violations can be very difficult to deal with. But I've also found that if the local government doesn't actually actively, and I'm not saying you're not doing this, I'm just saying sometimes those of us who live in the neighborhood and who are complying feel like, gosh, you know, this fence has been up for 2 years, we know it's in violation, what's going on? And that usually means that just a lack of information. And in the districts that I've lived in, and sometimes there would be a code enforcement report that would be sent ahead of time to the Civic Association to say, you know, here are the 7 that we're working on and this is the status. And that really can help within the neighborhood have people feel that things are moving forward and that things are being resolved, because so often the code enforcement violations are just lack of information. It's not like somebody decides to wake up in the morning and do something. So that's just sort of an editorial comment on my part, because they can be damaging to sort of the fabric of the neighborhood and sort of neighborhoodness, you know, living in a historic district.
We have a number of, I guess, different points of contact within our historic districts and dealing with our historic properties. You know, from my perspective, the association is normally the most effective point of contact, because they're able to disseminate information usually much more quickly and effectively than you know, the city's ordinances require. But I've talked with the current leadership and about some approaches to you know, ending up exactly with what you're saying, with you know, a more effective line of communication, more engagement by the staff with the association. Every association operates a little bit differently. Within Hyde Park, for instance, usually the individual that's assigned to that particular task contacts our office, and we walk through those issues with them. They have obviously more prioritized points of concerns for some things other than other things. And you know, I've offered to also attend meetings periodically, or have a staff member attend if that's appropriate. So we're definitely, you know, open to forging good communication. One thing I think, if someone's unsure of, obviously within the public, they can certainly contact our office. There's a number of different ways to do that. And of course, there's the old-fashioned pick up the phone and call us, but there's emails. There's also the customer service center on the city's website. It's a very effective tool. And we, you know, will respond back to that after we've gathered the appropriate information and know the facts of what the issue is. So there's a number of different approaches, and I think, you know, it's, as I said, one good byproduct of this is I think we're probably going to have some changes in the way that the staff and the association move forward.
At this point in time, may I have a motion to accept the documents that were submitted to legal counsel during this hearing?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. On our agenda, and I know it has been discussed earlier in this meeting, our next regularly scheduled meeting for the HPC will be March 13th, 2019 at 9 a.m. Is there any other new business to be brought forward this morning?
Just one moment. We might be in there.
Oh, I see. It was just a typographical error.
It's March 12th.
Just to correct the record, the next meeting is March 12th.
March 12th.
Apologize about that.
Right. If there is no further business to review this morning, then I will adjourn this meeting. It is 10:03 a.m.
Thank you.